Sausages were always marketed as comfort in a casing. Cheap, filling, the quick answer when money was tight and time was short. For decades, they've been a familiar presence on breakfast tables, at cookouts, and in lunchboxes across America. But what if those sizzling links weren't nourishment at all? What if they were quietly setting you up for cancer, heart disease, or even a dangerous case of food poisoning? The Centers for Disease Control reports that 1 in 6 Americans suffers foodborne illness every single year. And the World Health Organization warns just 50 grams of processed meat a day, that's barely a single sausage, raises your cancer risk by 18%. Put simply, the same bite you grew up trusting could be the one that sends you to the doctor. How many times have you unwrapped a brand you believed in, never realizing it might be packed with additives banned overseas, or produced in facilities where the reality looks nothing like the glossy package on the shelf? Meanwhile, corporations keep cashing in, pushing products that don't just fill plates, but slowly shorten lives. This is the Downturn Report. Today, we're exposing 6 sausage brands you should never buy, because what's inside isn't comfort, it's betrayal. Number 1. Johnsonville. The package looks harmless and almost comforting, with the red and white logo glowing from the freezer like an old friend waving across the street. Johnsonville was sold as the taste of America together, the sausage you could throw on the grill without worrying about cost or class. It was the food of backyard laughter, where fathers held spatulas and kids licked mustard off their fingers. But peel back that nostalgia, and the neighbor at the cookout isn't bringing joy. It's delivering poison dressed up as tradition. Inside those familiar bratwursts and cheddar links hides sodium nitrite, the chemical already banned in Germany, Austria, and Norway because of its proven link to colorectal cancer. The World Health Organization warns that just 50 grams of processed meat a day, basically one sausage, can spike cancer risk by 18%. And here's the gut punch. This isn't some far-off warning. It's the sausage sitting in your freezer right now. Johnsonville doesn't just flirt with that risk. It brags about it, pumping 700 milligrams of sodium into every link while slapping labels like wholesome and family-sized on the package. That's like pouring antifreeze into a glass and calling it grandma's sweet tea. A slow-acting time bomb dressed up as dinner. And if the recipe itself wasn't enough to sour the taste, the lies on the label should do the trick. In 2021, Johnsonville faced a lawsuit for stamping all natural on products laced with synthetic preservatives like BHA and propylgalate, both flagged for damaging the liver and kidneys. The case made noise, then vanished. Smoke, gone in seconds. Johnsonville kept moving billions in sales, while families kept swallowing chemicals. But the cruelty doesn't stop with the customer. It bleeds into the workers forced to keep the conveyor belts moving. In 2020, at the Sheboygan Falls plant, employees reported 12-hour shifts, standing in blood-slick aisles with ammonia burning their lungs. OSHA complaints described workers coughing up blood, fainting in the heat, collapsing beside spoiled meat. When COVID hit, Johnsonville refused to slow down. Over 200 workers got sick. Families lost breadwinners. Lives cut short by corporate choice. Imagine clocking in to make food for America, only to be treated as disposable as the plastic casing on a brat. And then there are the pigs, the silent casualties whose screams never make the commercials. A mercy for animals. Investigation in 2018 showed pigs beaten with rods, dragged by their legs, left to die in filth at a Johnsonville supplier. Their broken bodies became the sausages families grilled on Sunday afternoons. The company's response? A polished press release, a quick break with the supplier, then back to business. If cruelty disappears once the cameras stop rolling, how many more animals suffer unseen just so America can keep buying 2 packs for $7? So when Johnsonville stares back at you from the shelf, it's not a question of taste. It's a question of what you're willing to swallow. For older Americans counting every dollar, the temptation is real. But so are the hospital bills, the shortened breaths, and the empty chairs at the dinner table, cancer-linked chemicals, corporate lies, workers coughing up blood, animals living out nightmares. This isn't just food. It's a chain of suffering hidden in plain sight. The truth is, real nourishment doesn't have to come wrapped in deception. Sausages from brands like Applegate Farms, or even homemade patties mixed from ground turkey and spices, prove you don't need synthetic preservatives to put food on the table. Yes, it might cost a little more up front, but compared to the price of chemotherapy, dialysis, or funeral flowers, it's not expensive at all. Number 2. Hillshire Farm. The red label with the cheerful barn has always looked like a postcard from simpler times. For decades, Hillshire Farm whispered "home" when you pulled it from the fridge. Their smoked sausages and kielbasa became fixtures at potlucks, church gatherings, and Friday night football tailgates, the kind of food that made life feel steady when the world outside was anything but. Hillshire was sold as a little taste of the farm in every bite, but peel back the advertising smoke, and what you smell isn't hickory wood. It's the stench of corporate shortcuts, polluted rivers, and scandals so grotesque they turn appetite into anger. The unraveling began in 2014 when Tyson Foods bought Hillshire Farm for $8.5 billion. From that moment on, the word farm in the brand's name became a punchline. According to a Reuters investigation, Tyson was the single worst polluter of America's waterways from the meat industry, dumping more than 104 million pounds of toxic waste into rivers and lakes between 2010 and 2016. Facilities tied to Hillshire sausage production were part of that mess. The commercials sold slow-smoked, farm-crafted flavor, but families were really buying into factory runoff choking the same rivers where their kids once skipped rocks. The cozy barn image masked chemical streams, and then came the recalls. In 2021, 15,000 pounds of Hillshire sausages were yanked off shelves because bits of plastic from broken machinery were turning up inside the links. The USDA claimed no injuries were reported, but one Alabama grandmother told Consumer Reports she cracked a tooth on a sausage that crunched like a Lego. Official silence is cheap when it's someone else footing the dental bill. And how many more broken molars or choking hazards go unreported, simply because working families don't have the money or the time to fight corporate lawyers in court? A company that calls itself Farm Fresh was literally feeding people factory shrapnel. But the ugliest stain wasn't plastic, it was children. In 2023, labor investigations revealed that contractors under Tyson were using kids as young as 13 to clean dangerous meatpacking machinery overnight. Some of those plants supplied parts for Hillshire products. Picture children scrubbing conveyor belts soaked in ammonia and blood while their classmates were home asleep. The Department of Labor fined the contractors. Tyson took a public, but Hillshire? It stayed quiet, the barn on the package still smiling, as if child labor was just another unlisted ingredient. If there's anything more chilling than plastic in your sausage, it's broken childhoods baked into the price tag. And while Hillshire loves to brag about no artificial flavors, the fine print tells another story. Their sausages are loaded with sodium diacetate, potassium lactate, and vague, natural flavorings that sound more like chemistry experiments than food. Each link carries over 1,200 milligrams of sodium, an artery-clogging trap disguised as comfort. For older Americans already battling high blood pressure or heart disease, that's not dinner. That's a setup for the ER. And remember, this isn't some far-off problem. This is the sausage sitting in your fridge right now. Because when you toss a Hillshire pack into your cart, the receipt may say just a few dollars. But the real price? Polluted rivers, cracked teeth, exploited children, and seniors eating their way towards strokes, while a billion-dollar parent company laughs all the way to the bank. That's not comfort. That's betrayal. Yet there are better paths forward. Smaller brands like Belinsky's craft organic chicken sausages with real ingredients like spinach, garlic, and red peppers, instead of preservatives long enough to fill a Scrabble board. Local butchers are also returning to nitrate-free recipes, grinding and stuffing meat right in front of you instead of hiding behind factory walls. Choosing them isn't just about taste. It's about deciding whether the food on your plate honors the people who make it, or hides their suffering. So the next time that smiling Red Barn looks back at you from the freezer aisle, ask yourself a sharper question than any steak knife. Do you really smell the farm, or just the factory pretending to be one? Number 3. Eckrich. Eckrich built its reputation as the safe choice of the deli aisle. Not the dirt-cheap can, not the gourmet link, just the middle ground. Ads showed warm Midwestern kitchens, casseroles on the table, skillets hissing with kielbasa. For older Americans trying to budget without sacrificing dignity, Eckrich seemed like a steady hand. But peel back the shiny label, and the truth smells less like hardwood smoke and more like industrial waste. Far from trustworthy, Eckrich is built on misleading words, cruel practices, and health risks that cut deepest into the families it claims to serve. The first red flag is the label itself. Eckrich promises premium cuts and hardwood smoked meats. Sounds comforting until you learn those cuts are really mechanically separated scraps. Whatever's left after the real meat is stripped away. Imagine sweeping up sawdust and calling it fine furniture. Those scraps get padded with corn syrup, sodium phosphate, and other additives so questionable some are banned from baby food for links to kidney stress and heart damage. Yet families still pick Eckrich up, believing it's a safer choice. But the deception runs deeper. Eckrich is owned by Smithfield Foods, the same corporate giant caught in price-fixing, labor abuse, and pandemic scandals. In 2021, whistleblowers told ProPublica that Eckrich plants forced employees into 12-hour shifts in 130-degree heat, wrapped in suffocating PPE, sometimes denied even water. One worker put it bluntly, "You either faint at the machine or get fired." These aren't steady jobs. They're sweatshops where exhaustion is another raw material. Immigrants, single parents, older workers, the backbone of the workforce, treated like disposable gears. And then there's the cruelty behind the curtain. In 2020, undercover footage revealed pigs in crates so tight they couldn't turn. Skin rubbed raw, wounds untreated, some animals screaming, others dying in filth. Smithfield didn't deny it. They just called it a policy violation and moved on. Quality from farm to table. More like prison to table. And even if you never see the farms or factories, the damage ends up on your plate. A single serving of Eckrich sausage packs over 1,100 milligrams of sodium, 13 grams of saturated fat, and a calorie load designed to wreck aging bodies. For Americans over 60 with high blood pressure, heart disease, or diabetes, that's not just poor nutrition. It's a countdown to the next hospital visit. The brand that markets itself as wholesome is quietly chipping away at the health of the very families it pretends to protect. Better choices exist. Sausages from local butchers, co-ops, or farms that raise animals humanely and skip the chemical cocktail. Yes, they cost more. But they don't come with the hidden tax of hospital bills, worker abuse, or cruelty. Eckrich thrives on the illusion that middle ground means safety. But when that ground is built on exploitation, toxins, and suffering, standing in the middle still means you're sinking. So the next time you set a skillet on the stove, ask yourself, is this really tradition you're serving, or betrayal sliced into every bite? Number 4. Bar S Foods. Bar S has always worn the mask of a bargain hero. Sitting low on the freezer shelf at Walmart and dollar stores, its bold red and yellow packaging practically shouts, "You don't have to go hungry tonight." A 12-ounce pack for under $1.50 felt like a miracle to families staring down rising bills. For retirees stretching every Social Security check, Bar S wasn't just food, it was survival. But that bargain price tag carries a hidden cost. A helping hand turned into a loaded weapon. In 2016, Bar S recalled over 372,000 pounds of hot dogs and sausages after fears of listeria contamination. And listeria isn't just an upset stomach. It's a killer. It preys on the elderly, the sick, and the weak, often ending in meningitis, miscarriages, or death. Those sausages weren't stuck in warehouses. They'd already made it onto plates before the recall went public. And it wasn't a freak accident. It was a symptom of a system that prizes speed and profit over safety. Back in 2010, the USDA shut down a Bar S plant in Oklahoma after repeated sanitation failures. Inspectors found maggots writhing in drains and blood-slick floors, so dangerous workers wrapped plastic bags around their boots just to stay upright. One employee admitted, "We just prayed the meat stayed cold long enough to kill what was in it." And what exactly are people eating? Mechanically separated meat, industry code for ground carcasses, bone dust and all, mixed with sodium nitrite, sodium ascorbate, corn syrup, and mystery flavoring so vague they don't even have to be named on the label. Research has tied these additives to colon cancer, hypertension, and metabolic disease. It's not food. It's chemistry disguised as dinner. But the cruelest twist isn't what's in the sausages, it's who Bar S targets. You won't find it stocked at Whole Foods or Trader Joe's. Instead, it piles high in dollar stores, discount bins at Walmart, and food banks. Bar S knows its market: low-income households, retirees, families on SNAP, people already cornered by poverty and stripped of choice. What looks like charity pricing is really entrapment, a cycle of cheap food that chips away at health until doctors' bills erase every penny saved. And while Americans eat, the profits flow overseas. In 2010, Bar S was bought by Sigma Alimentos, a Mexican conglomerate repeatedly accused of union busting, dangerous working conditions, and underpaying workers across Latin America. Every dollar squeezed from American poverty feeds a global empire built on the same disregard for workers abroad. There are better options: plant-based sausages with ingredients you recognize, or small-batch chicken sausages without nitrates. Or just make your own. Turkey, rosemary, fennel, olive oil, frozen for a month's worth of breakfasts. So the next time you see that bright yellow label calling from the freezer aisle, ask yourself, is it really saving you money, or is it stealing your health one bite at a time? Because cheap doesn't always mean affordable. Sometimes it means you're the one paying the price, in ways far more costly than a grocery bill. Number 5. Jimmy Dean. For decades, Jimmy Dean felt like America's breakfast grandpa. The warm drawl on the radio, the smiling man in commercials promising real breakfast for real people. His name carried trust, the kind that sounded like someone who'd pull up a chair at your kitchen table and swear he'd never sell you what he wouldn't serve to his own grandkids. Even the packaging played along. Golden yellows, home-style lettering, nostalgia baked right into every biscuit box. But what if that charm was nothing more than a mask? What if behind that smile sits a corporate machine pumping out exactly what working Americans fear most: hidden chemicals and broken promises? The sausages are where the betrayal begins. Take the original pork roll or those frozen bacon, egg, and cheese biscuits. Inside, you're not getting wholesome cuts of pork, but a slurry of mechanically separated meat loaded with sodium nitrite, MSG, and BHA, the so-called freshness preservative, already flagged in California as a cancer-causing agent. Europe bans it. Here, it's sold every morning to retirees who think they're buying tradition. One sandwich carries nearly 900 milligrams of sodium and almost half a day's worth of artery-clogging saturated fat. For older Americans with fragile hearts and high blood pressure, that's not breakfast. It's a ticking time bomb in a biscuit wrapper. Imagine pouring salt straight into your coffee and calling it nourishment. That's the cruel irony of Jimmy Dean. And about that real meat image, it doesn't come from a Tennessee farm. It comes from Smithfield Foods, the pork giant now owned by WH Group, a multinational conglomerate in China. A cozy southern brand turned into a global cash register ringing for foreign shareholders. Smithfield itself has been dogged by accusations: environmental damage, animal cruelty, and labor abuses. In 2020, a class action lawsuit claimed the company colluded to inflate pork prices, draining hundreds of millions from American households. Think about that. While you were stretching pennies to buy sausage rolls, corporate executives were pocketing the difference by design. The cruelty didn't stop at wallets. During COVID, Smithfield's South Dakota plant, responsible for Jimmy Dean production, became one of the deadliest outbreak zones in the country. More than 1,300 workers sick. At least 4 dead. These weren't faceless statistics. They were immigrants, single parents, people who couldn't afford to miss a shift. Called essential, but treated as expendable. Forced into ammonia-soaked facilities where safety was as optional as the truth in a press release. Meanwhile, the branding never slowed. In 2021, Jimmy Dean urged Americans to rediscover breakfast, flashing happy families biting golden biscuits. What they didn't show were whistleblower reports of conveyor belts streaked with dirt, hair, even shards of metal. They didn't show lawsuits over unsafe conditions or polluted rivers downstream from pork plants. Nostalgia on the box. Negligence behind the scenes. But not all mornings come with betrayal. Teton Waters Ranch offers grass-fed beef sausages with no nitrates, no BHA, and no ties to overseas conglomerates. Or make your own. Brown ground turkey with garlic and sage, scramble eggs, and freeze them in whole-grain English muffins. For under $6, you'll have 5 breakfasts ready. Meals that don't leave you questioning your health or your conscience. Because breakfast shouldn't feel like Russian roulette. It should feel like trust. Number 6. Armor. Armor was once the taste of America's grit. The sausage links on a child's school tray. The tins of Vienna sausages tucked away in pantries for tough times. The cheap protein that kept families afloat during wars, recessions, and long weeks when paychecks stretched thin. For many older Americans, armor wasn't luxury. It was survival. It promised reliability on a budget, the kind of food that said, "We'll get through this." Yet behind that sentimental image of resilience hides something far uglier. Because the reality is that armor has built an empire, not on nourishment, but on scraps, slop, and systems of abuse that prey directly on the poorest households, the very people least able to say no. Start with what Armor calls meat. Its Vienna sausages, still one of the brand's biggest sellers, aren't crafted from cuts of pork or beef, but from what's left behind once real meat is stripped away. Mechanically separated chicken and pork, carcasses ground into a frothy pink paste where bone, marrow, and scraps blur together. By law, the USDA lets them call this meat. Armor cans it, drowns it in salty brine, and brags it can sit on a shelf for 3 to 5 years. That isn't tradition, it's embalming. What used to be the waste bin of the meat industry is now dressed up as dinner for the working poor. If sausage is supposed to sizzle with life, Armor's version feels like it was engineered in a morgue. And sometimes, even that paste comes with surprises. In 2017, the FDA logged multiple complaints of Armor sausages with black slime, shards of metal, and chemical odors strong enough to turn stomachs. One Kentucky woman said her elderly father vomited blood after eating a can. Armor deflected blame onto storage conditions and quietly kept shipping cans. When the food on your table hides betrayal, knowing the truth isn't optional, it's survival. When the food on your table hides betrayal, the only defense is truth. But these stories don't end here. They'll keep happening unless more people see them. So hit like, hit subscribe, and share this video. Because the more eyes on the truth, the harder it is for these companies to hide.